Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. We are studying the commentary on the Brahma Sutras by Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya Deva. We are studying his commentary on the 7th Sutra. So here, the Sutra is Tannishthasya Moksha Upadeshat. That is, Tat means Brahman, the ultimate reality. So a person who is focused on Brahman, that person gets moksha. That is what is taught by the Upanishads, by the Vedas. Because a person gets the knowledge of identity of Brahman and Atman, Brahman and the individual soul. That person gets moksha. Since to get a knowledge of the identity of Brahman and Atman, whatever entity should get that knowledge should be conscious, sentient entity. And since Pradhana is not a sentient entity, it goes without saying that this cannot happen in the case of Pradhana, and hence Pradhana cannot be the cause of this universe. Also, if one were to say that a person who is conscious will be taught that that person is in reality Pradhana, which is unconscious. When somebody says Tat Tvamasi, Tat Tvamasi, you are that. If the word that means Pradhana, which is unconscious or insentient, then it will mean that a conscious person is actually non-conscious, which will lead to an absurd situation, just like a person who played a prank on a blind person who was trying to find one's way to one's village. The person who was playing the prank, say Mr. A, told this Mr. Blind person, Mr. B, he took his hand and made him grab the tail of a raging bull, a mad bull. And so that person ended up going nowhere, was circling there. So that kind of a anartha or a dangerous situation, predicament will be the fate of a person who is taught that you are in fact non-conscious or insentient, and therefore tasmat, therefore yatha, just like swargadi arthinah agnihotradi sadhanam yatha bhutam upadishati, just like a person who wants to attain things like heaven, swargadi arthinah, a person who is desirous of, wants to attain the spheres like heaven or some other such fruit, that person is taught agnihotradi sadhanam, means of attaining such fruits, such results, like the agnihotra sacrifice. Agnihotram juhuyat swarga kamaha. This is the Vedic statement. Those who are desirous of attaining swarga, they should perform the agnihotra sacrifice. Yatha bhutam upadishati, just like the scripture or the Vedas, they instruct a person who desires things like the heaven. They instruct to fulfill such desires, means to attain those desires like Agnihotra sacrifice. Tatha, similarly, mumukshoho api, even in the case of people who want to attain moksha, Mumukshu means a person desirous of attaining moksha. Even in the case of that person, sa atma tattvamasi shveta keto iti. In phrases or sentences like sa atma, that is atma, tattvamasi shveta keto, and ho shveta keto, you are that. Iti, in this manner, yatha bhutameva. So just like the Vedas instruct means to attain different desires like heaven, yatha bhutam, in truth, means they don't beat around the bush. That is the idea. Yatha bhutam, as it is, they directly instruct. Similarly, for people who are desirous of attaining moksha also, the Upanishads or the Vedas, yatha bhutameva atmanam upadishati iti yuktam. It's only logical to, it's only reasonable to presume or conclude that just like in the case of material desires or desires like heaven and so on, the Vedas instruct the means without beating around the bush. Directly they instruct the means as they are. Yatha bhutam means as they are, in their true form. Similarly, for the sake of people who are desirous of attaining moksha also, the Vedas, they instruct the true means to attain that. This concluding like this would be logical. Evam cha sati, that being the case, tat tapta parashuhu grahana moksha drishtantena satya abhisandasya moksha upadesha upapadyate. So this being the case, tapta parashuhu grahana moksha drishtantena, by the example of a person who holds or grabs a hot red hot iron. So what is the thing here? So it seems that in the olden days there was this custom that if there were people who were suspected of having stolen something, of having committed a theft, those people, to prove their innocence, they were asked to hold on, grab a red hot rod, iron rod, tapta parashu. So red hot iron rod, if they were able to grab, then that means they are innocent, and so moksha, they will get free. So by that example, through that example, what is told here? Satya abhisandasya moksha upadesha upapadyate. So it is only rational, or it only makes sense, that a person who is satya abhisandasya, who thinks, who identifies oneself with the real Brahman, ultimate reality, does not think of oneself as different from ultimate reality, identifies oneself with the ultimate reality. Such a person is fit to be instructed about moksha. So such a person should be given the instruction of moksha. The idea here is, just like a person who is innocent would be not at all afraid and would grab an iron rod, hot iron rod, red hot iron rod, to prove one's innocence. Similarly, a person who has strong conviction, firm conviction that I am the real eternal Brahman, that person should be given instruction or instructed to attain moksha. So here the idea is also the idea of who is qualified to get the instruction of moksha. So unless one gets identity, one gets identified with the ultimate reality, that is Brahman, there is no point in giving that person. So identity means this firm conviction. Unless a person has, that person cannot be. It does not make any sense to instruct that person on about moksha. Anyatha hi amukhye sad atma tattva upadeshe aham uktam asmi iti vidyat itivat sampan matra midam anitya phalam syad. So if we were not to take this standpoint that only a person who identifies oneself with Brahman, that I am Brahman, should be instructed about moksha. Anyatha, if we were not to take this line of thought, then sad atma upadeshe hi amukhye. If we were to consider the Atma Tattva Upadesha, the instruction of the Vedas about the entity or the principle of the Sat Atma, that is the Atma which is always existing, eternal Atma. If we were to consider it as Amukhya, if we were to consider that instruction as a secondary instruction, not the primary instruction of the Vedas, and also if we were to consider Aham Uktam Asmi Itis Vidyat. In the Aitreya Aranyaka, it is there that I am Prana, Aham Uktam Asmi. Uktam means I am Prana. Prana. Ukta. So I am Prana. Like that, if Vidyat, know that I am Prana. If this kind of, so that is a particular context. Of course, Brahman alone comes, manifests as Prana, all the Panchakosha because of ignorance. So it is that context. But if one were to think that I am Brahman is a secondary meaning of the Vedas, and one were to hold on to this meaning that I am Prana as the primary meaning, then what will happen? Then because it is Sampan Matram, because it is just a particular attainment, it is only a particular attainment, or it is a particular superimposition. So Anitya Phalam Syat, it will actually, it is unreal, it is not real. And so then this would not make sense. And therefore, Tatra, in that case, Moksha Upadeshaha na upapadyata. One cannot give the instruction. There, it would not be reasonable or not logical to give the instruction of moksha. Why? Because a person is thinking that that person is something which is unreal. What is moksha? Moksha is to understand that that person is real. So how can you say, or how can you instruct a person about the reality of Atman when that person is believing that that person is unreal Prana? That is the idea. Tasmat, therefore, na sat animanyatma shabdasya gaunatvam. So therefore, this sat, which is denoted by the word Atma, this Sat which is ever existing, which is also subtle, that does not have, the word Atma does not have a secondary meaning. It is not, it is Mukhya, means it is the primary meaning. It is not Gauna, it is not a subsidiary or secondary meaning. Bhritye tu Swami Bhritya Bhedasya Pratyakshatvat Upapannaha Gauna Atma Shabdaha Mamatma Bhadrasena iti. So this example was given that though the owner or the employer or the person who is boss, that person, when an employee or a servant seeing a servant, that person says Mama Atma Bhadrasena. Bhadrasena is supposed to be the name of the servant. That servant is my Atma, means he means everything to me. He is my left hand, right hand, like that. So in that statement, Mamatma Bhadrasena, there, for the sake of the servant, the word Atma can be used in a secondary sense. Because Swami Bhritya Vedasya Pratyakshatvat, because it is directly palpable, Pratyakshatvat, it is quite direct. What is direct? Because of its being direct. What is direct? Swami Bhritya Bheda, the difference between the employer and the employee, difference between the master and the servant is quite palpable. There is no confusion there. So, Upapannaha Gauna Atma Shabdaha. So therefore, in that statement, my self or my Atma is Bhadrasena. Bhadrasena is my Atma, or Bhadrasena is my life. There, it is quite logical to use Atma word in the secondary sense, because even if you use it in the secondary sense, the difference between master and the servant is quite clear. Apicha, further, Kvachit Gaunaha Shabdaha Drishta iti na etavata Shabda Pramanake Arthe Gauni Kalpana Nyaya. Also, if one were to use or one were to come across the usage of a particular word in a secondary meaning, that does not mean Shabda Drishta iti. Kvachit, somewhere, Gaunaha Shabda Drishta iti. We see one Shabda, one word used in a Gauna, secondary meaning. Na etavata Shabda Pramanake Arthe Gauni Kalpana Nyaya. Nyaya, it is not logical, or it does not lead to the conclusion that that particular word has to be always used in Gauni, secondary meaning. So a word may have so many meanings, and one meaning might be the primary meaning, other meanings might be secondary meaning. Just because in some place that word has been used in a secondary meaning, it does not mean that that word can be used in the secondary meaning all the time, or that the secondary meaning is the main meaning of that word. That does not stand to reason, it is not logical. Sarvatra Anashvasa Prasangat. Because if we do that, then there will be confusion regarding the usage of the word. This has been already seen, this logic. Then there will be, so for example, the word Jalam, water. So water can be used in various senses. Jalavat Taralam, one usage. When somebody wants to understand something, this is etattu Jalavat Taralam. This is very simple. You can understand. It's very simple like water. Simple like water means what? Means it is very easy to understand. But there the meaning Jalam of Jalam, the word Jala, is used in a subsidiary meaning. But if somebody says Jalam Anaya, you bring me water, that time you cannot bring some simple explanation. At that time you need to give drinking water. Otherwise, what will happen? There will be huge confusion regarding that word itself. So that is what Anashvasa Prasangat, because of the disbelief or confusion in the usage of that, in all the usages of that word. So that is why it cannot be always used in subsidiary sense. Yattu Uktam. Also, what has been said earlier by the Purva Paksha, Chetana Achetanayoho Sadharana Atma Shabdaha Kratu Jwalanayoho Iva Jyoti Shabda Iti. Here, in some sutras which we have been studying, Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya Deva uses a different method of refuting the Purva Paksha. Usually, the Purva Paksha's standpoint is presented and immediately it is refuted. But here, Shankaracharya is first elaborating what the Purva Paksha or the opponent is telling, and afterwards, after many passages, is recounting one by one and then refuting. That is also one style. So that is why he is saying Yattu Uktam, what was said. So when we see this Purva Paksha and Siddhanti, that is opponent and the person who is commenting on that particular text, it would help us to imagine a courtroom scenario. Because even though most of us might not have actually gone to courtroom, let that not be so. Let not people go to courtrooms. But we are all familiar with courtrooms because of movies. Okay. So let us imagine that scenario. Then it will become helpful or easier for us to. So in that also, sometimes when the opponent is telling something, immediately the other side, suppose the prosecution is telling something, immediately defense side will present the argument. It can be done like that also. Or the prosecution goes on presenting arguments, and finally defense will say, this was told, this was told. And so here the second method has been adopted for the previous so many sutras. Now Shankaracharya says, Yattu Uktam, what has been said, Chetana Achetana Yoho Sadharana Atma Shabda, that the word Atma is used both for conscious and unconscious entities. The word Atma is used both for conscious and unconscious or non-conscious entities. For example, Kratuhu Jwalanayoho iva Jyoti Shabda iti. Like the word Jyoti is used both for fire, Jwalana, and Kratu, which is Vedic sacrifice. So similarly, Atma can be used both for conscious and non-conscious or unconscious insentient entities. Iti. This is the argument of the Sankhya philosophers. Tatna, it is not so. It is not so. Anekarthatvasya anyapyatvat. Anekarthatvasya, because the very logic which was given earlier, that if we were to have so many meanings, anekartha, of one word, which are all primary meanings, if we were to have that kind of a situation, then it will lead to a very illogical kind of situation, very undesirable situation. So tasmat, therefore, Chetana Vishaya eva mukhya Atma Shabdaha. So by the word Atma, the main meaning, mukhya meaning, main meaning of the word Atma, therefore, is only Chetana Vishaya. It is only a subject or something which is referring to something which is conscious. Only in that sense, that it should be the main meaning of the word Atma. Chetanatva upacharat bhutadishu prayujyate bhutatma indriyatma iti. And also, whatever Sankhya philosophers said, that bhutatma, indriyatma, like that, this atma is used in the case of non-conscious entities also. That is used because chetanatva upacharat, because it is in contact with consciousness. Because of upachara, coming in contact with consciousness, bhutadishu prayujyate. It is used in the case of bhuta adishu, different elements, etc. and so on. It is used. Bhuta atma, indriya atma, etc. That is used because they are in the proximity or in contact with consciousness. That is why they are used in that sense. So we cannot say that the primary sense of the word Atma is something unconscious. It is not a word which is used equally in the case of conscious and unconscious or non-conscious entities. That is not true. Sadharanatve api Atma Shabdasya na prakaranam upapadam. And also, va kinchit nischayakam antarena anyatara vrittita nirdharayitum shakyate. And also, Sadharanatve api. Okay, even if we were to agree this standpoint of the Sankhya philosophers, that the word Atma, Atma Shabdasya, Sadharanatve api, even if the word Atma were to be considered to be equally or generally used both in the case of conscious and non-conscious entities, na prakaranam upapadam va kinchit nishchayakam antarena anyatara vittita nirdharayitum shakyate. Unless there is a prakaranam upapadam va, unless there is a context, prakarana means context, unless there is a context or upapada, a nearby word, unless there is a context or a word just after it, one cannot kinchit nishchayakam antarena, or something which is concluding the meaning as consciousness. So either it should be the context of that passage or that sentence, or it should be a word that is following the word Atma. Whatever, either of these two. Other than these, anyatara vrittita nirdharayitum na shakyate. One cannot use the word Atma in some other meaning. Some other meaning means the meaning of non-conscious. Only if that context demands, or if there is some other word nearby, then it can be used, like Bhutatma, Indriyatma, like that. Otherwise, it cannot be used in the sense of unconscious or non-conscious. Nacha atra, also here, achetanasya nishchayakam kinchit karanam asti. Also here, there is no reason, na kinchit karanam asti, there is no reason to take the word of, take the word Atman in the meaning of non-conscious. There is no, actually there is no need to see that the word of Atman means subconscious. Think like that. Prakritam tu, because it has been already explained. Indeed, sad ikshatra, that the ikshatra, the person who, or the entity which does the activity of ikshana. Ikshana means thinking or seeing or contemplating, envisaging, etc. That entity, sat, that is always existing. Sannihita chetanaha shvetaketu. Also that sat, and also why? Because Shvetaketu is Sannihita, is just after that Sad. Sadeva Somya Idamagra Asit. So Sad Eva Somya. Somya is a good looking one. Who is that good looking one? Shvetaketu. So just in proximity of this Sat, there is Shvetaketu. So that is Sannihita. Sannihita means it is nearby, proximity. And so Nahi Chetanasya Shvetaketo ho Achetana Atma Sambhavati iti avochama. And also we have avochama told, we have already told that the conscious Shvetaketu can never be unconscious Atma. That means Atma cannot be unconscious in the case of Shvetaketu, because Shvetaketu himself is conscious. So this we have already told. Tasmat, therefore, Chetana Vishaya Iha Atma Shabda iti Nishchiyate. Therefore, we conclude Nishchiyate. We conclude that Atma, the word Atma, refers to Chetana. The reference of the word Atma is to something which is Chetana or conscious. Jyoti Shabda api Laukikena Prayogena Jwalana eva Rudaha. See, one important thing which I have been constantly telling is the simplicity of the Sanskrita of Shankaracharya. This one understands when one reads other texts written by other authors. So it's very simple. people who know any Indian language can easily understand. So this is not big problem, complication. Jyoti shabdah api, even the word Jyoti, laukikena prayogena, if we were to go by the common usage, jwalane eva rudaha. It is conventional to use the word Jyoti in the sense of fire only, fire alone. Arthavada akalpitena tu jwalana sadrishyena kratau pravritta iti adrishtantah. So, because it has been used in the context of Arthavada, Arthavada means a eulogical kind of sentence, where something is appreciated in order to encourage a particular kind of ritual or action. That is called Arthavada. So, Arthavada kalpitena, because it has been imagined in Arthavada, because it has been imagined in a kind of eulogy. Tu jwalana sadrishyena kratau pravritta. The jwalana sadrishya, or the comparison with fire of kratu, Vedic sacrifice, Vedic ritual. And so that is why it is used in the meaning of Vedic sacrifice, because it is used like that in the sense of Arthavada. Arthavada means where the fire, Vedic sacrifice, is compared to fire. And so using that analogy, which is used in a eulogy, eulogizing that particular Vedic sacrifice or Vedic ritual, that is why this kratau pravritta, in that particular context, this kratu or Vedic sacrifice is considered to be like jwalana, agni or fire. So because it is referring to only a specific context, it is iti adrishtantah. That is not a proper example. It cannot be quoted as a proper example. Athava, or else, Purva Sutre eva Atma Shabdam Nirasta Samasta Gaunatva Sadharanatva Shankataya Vyakhyaya Tatah Swatantra eva Pradhana Karana Nirakarana Hetuhu Vyakhyayah Tannishtasya Moksha Upadeshatiti. So, or else we can also say that we means Advaita Vedanti, those who follow Advaita Vedanta philosophy, that in the previous sutra itself, all the secondary and generalized meanings, Gaunash Chet Na Atma Shabdat. So, if one were to say that the word Atma is used in a secondary sense, no, it cannot be so. Why? Because if one were to say that the word Ikshati means that is what? One who does Ikshana, envisages or thinks. If one were to say that that is used in a secondary sense, that is not so. Why? Because Atma word is used there. That was the 6th sutra. So in the previous sutra itself, all the arguments relating to Atma word, the word Atman being used in a secondary sense or in a general sense, all have been Shankataya Vyakhyaya. All the doubts or all the oppositions or arguments have been explained. Tataha, therefore, after explaining that, Swatantra eva pradhana karana nirakarana hetu vyakhyaya. This sutra, here there is no point of discussing the subsidiary nature or the secondary nature or the general nature of the word Atman, because this sutra is for the sake of explaining Swatantra eva, independently explaining pradhana karana nirakarana hetu. So for the sake of explaining or setting aside pradhana as the cause of this universe. So this sutra should be taken like that, that it is meant to set aside pradhana as the cause of the universe. So here pradhana is not the cause of the universe. Tannishthasya moksha upadeshaditi. So only a person who is focused on Brahman will be taught, or can be, the person who is focused on Brahman will be taught moksha, like that. Tasmat, therefore, na achetanam pradhanam sat shabda vachyam. So therefore, sadeva somya idamagra asit, in that line, the word sad shabda vachyam, that which is indicated by the word sat, is not achetanam pradhanam, is not insentient or unconscious pradhana. Kutaschana pradhanam sat shabda vachyam. If one were to ask how or why is pradhana not the meaning of the word sat, for that next sutra. Heyatva avachanachya. Heyatva avachanachya. So what does it mean? It means that heyatva avachanat cha, that pradhana, it has not also been said that if you meditate on pradhana, you will not get moksha. So there is no heyatva, means nisheda, prohibition. Prohibition also is not there. Prohibition is also not there. That means there is no connection between pradhana and moksha. That is what the idea is. There is simply no connection between pradhana and moksha. It is completely out of context. Because even as prohibition, moksha is, pradhana is not mentioned. Avachanat means the not mentioned. What is not mentioning? Vedas are not mentioning about pradhana. So even as nishedha, as prohibition also, pradhana is not mentioned. So it is not told that, oh, you see, if you meditate on pradhana, then you will not get moksha. So if one were to say, so there is this Arundhati Nyaya. Arundhati Nyaya, we all know. Arundhati is a very faint star. So if you have to see, look at Arundhati, then I think in the olden days, people had so much of time because they did not have any OTT platform. So actually this thing is that after marriage, it seems there is a ritual. Some people might be doing this now also, I don't know. Arundhati. So somebody that husband has to show wife Arundhati. And so they will first show a star which is brighter, then they will go to less brighter, then finally they will show Arundhati. That is Arundhati Nyaya. So to understand a particular concept, you explain a concept which is not so abstruse, and from there take to, so from less abstruse or simpler concept to more complex or more abstruse concepts. That is the idea. So even in that sense, that, oh, pradhana is not the cause of this universe, or pradhana is not the meaning of the word sat. And so slowly you go to the real meaning of the word sat, Brahman. Even in that case also, that way also pradhana is not used. So the meaning is, it is completely out of syllabus, it is completely out of context. So, yadi anatma eva pradhanam satshabda vachyam sa atma tattvamasi iti iha upadishtam syat sa tad upadesha shravanat anatmagnataya tannishto ma bhut iti mukhyam atmanam upaditikshuhu tasya heyatvam bruyat. So it's a very wonderful argument. Yadi, if anatma eva pradhanam sat shabda vachyam, if we were to say that the anatma pradhana, that is the not self pradhana, is the meaning of the word sat. Sa atma tattvamasi iti iho upadishtam syat. So there, that particular Upadesha or instruction of the Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, which has been cited here, if in that case that Sat, the word Sat, were to indicate unconscious, not self-pradhana, then what will happen? Sat tad upadesha shravanat. After hearing that particular instruction, which is like you are pradhana, that means you are not self. What will happen? Anatmagayatya, anatmagnataya. Tannishto ma bhutiti. So after hearing this instruction, because that instruction essentially says that you are not Atman. Your pradhana means you are not Atman. So a person might think, Tannishto ma bhut, that let that person not be attached to not self, or let that person not be established. Tat nishtah. Tat means here now pradhana, which is not self. Ma bhut. Let that person not be established in not self. Mukhyam atmanam upadikshuhu tasya heyatvam bruyat. So if we were to say that in this case, in the Vedas, if the word Atma or the word Sat were to mean pradhana, then the Upanishad should have thought of a way to get out of this problem, and the Upanishad should have thought Tannishto Mabhut. Let not the aspirant be of the wrong idea that one is pradhana, not self. And so Mukhyam Atmanam Didukshuhu. So the teacher or guru or also Vedas would have told that, you see, would have desired didikshu, would have desired upadidikshu. That means that person would have desired to give the upadesha, desired to give some instruction, would have desired to give the upadesha or instruction that tasya heyatvam bruyat, that pradhana has to be avoided. Because pradhana is insentient, pradhana is non-conscious. And so here, if it were really true that the word Sat meant pradhana, then it would have been followed by the Guru's statement that, you see, you don't think you are pradhana or you are unconscious. So that is why you have to avoid thinking of pradhana or doing contemplation or meditation on pradhana. It's a bit convoluted logic. So we have to understand it properly. Yatha arundatim didarshayishuhu tat samipastham sthulam taram amukhyam prathamam arundati iti grahitva tam pratyakhyaya paschat arundatim eva grahayati tadvad na ayam atma iti bruyat. So just like yatha, just like arundatim didarshayat ishuhu, a person who is desirous of showing Arundhati, tat samipastham sthulam taram amukhyam. What does that person do? Tat samipastham, nearest to that, sthulam, more grosser, means which is easily palpable, which is easily visible. Taram, that star. Amukhyam, which is not the primary, means it is not Arundhati. Prathamam arundati iti grahitva. First, making that person understand that this is Arundhati. Tam pratyakhyaya. Afterwards, rejecting it, that this is not Arundhati. Paschat arundhati meva grahayati. Afterwards, shows Arundhati itself. Because once you focus there, then it is easier for you to focus on the lighter star. So shows like that. Tadvat na ayam atma iti bruyat. So similarly, here the teacher should have said that, you see, this tattvamasi shvetaketo, you are that, where that means, or the sat means pradhana. And then afterwards, the teacher should have said, see, you are not that, you are actually Atman. But the teacher does not say so. Nacha evam avochat. It has not been said like that. Sat matra atma avagati nishtaiva hi shashta prapataka parisamapti drishyate. Also, shashta prapataka means the 6th chapter of Chandogya Upanishad. 6th chapter, Parisamapti Drishyate, we see the end of 6th chapter, or the 6th chapter concluding as Sat Matra Atma Avagati Nishtaiva. In the Avagati, in the realization of Sat Matra Atma, of Atma, which is of the nature of eternal existence. Only in that realization do we see the end of the 6th chapter. We don't see something else. We don't see there the word Sat to mean Pradhana or something. Cha Shabdaha Pratignya Virodhabhyuchaya Pradarshanartha. And also the word Cha. So here, Heyatva Avachanat Cha in the Sutra, there is the word Cha is there. Cha usually means and. So why the word Cha? It could have been Heyatva Avachanat. Cha Shabdaha, the word Cha has been added. Pratignya Virodha Bhyuchaya Pradarsanartha. For the sake of Pratignya Virodhabhya Bhyuchaya. The Samuchaya or the combination of Pratignya and Virodha. Pratignya means a particular statement and Virodha means the contradiction of that statement. To bring the combination of that, this word Cha has been used here. Satyapi heyatva vachane pratignya virodha prasajyeta. If the heyatva vachane satyapi, if there were a statement, there was a statement which was telling that pradhana is something which you have to avoid, or pradhana is something which is prohibited, then pratignya virodha prasajyeta, then there would have been pratignya virodha. That means a contradiction of what has been already said. Karana vijnanathi sarvam vijnatam iti pratignatam. Because it has been pratignatam, it has been already said that Karana vijnanathi sarvam vijnatam. That by knowing the cause, everything is known. So if Chandogya Upanishad, if one has read, one will immediately understand what is being told here, that Mrittike ityeva satyam, like that the clay namadeyam vikaroyam vacharambanam. So Mrittika ityeva satyam. The clay alone is true. All the other things are only different permutations, combinations of names and forms. That is what is told before this comes. Before Tattvamasi Shvetaketu comes, it has been told that if you know the cause, you know everything. Karana vijnanathi sarvam vijnatam iti pratigyatam. It has been told already. It has been told that if you know, indeed by knowing the cause, you know everything. So if that has been told, and now if it is told that no, it is not so, then there is a contradiction of what has been already told. Uta tamadesham aprakshyo yena ashrutam shrutam bhavati amatam matam, avijñatam vijñatamiti. So there again, tamadesham apraksho. So did you ask? So when Shvetaketu returns to his home after the Gurukula period, and his father asks him, did you ask your Guru? Yena ashrutam shrutam bhavati. By what does that which is unheard get heard? Amatam matam. By what does that which is not thought of get thought of? Avijñatam vijñatam. By what does that which is not known gets known, etc. So katham nu bhagavah sa adesho bhavati iti. So how, oh sir, would that instruction be possible? Like that Shvetaketu asks. So yatha saumye kena mritpindena sarvam mrinmayam vijñatam syat vacharambanam vikaro namadheyam mrittika ityeva satyam. So that earlier Shankaracharya has said, Karana Vijnanathi Sarvam Vijnatamiti Pratignatam. It has been already stated that by knowing, indeed, by knowing the cause, everything is known. So that particular context he is now reminding us from the Chandogya Upanishad. Yatha, just like Saumyaikena Mritpindena. So by one Saumya, Ekena Mritpindena. So you see a lump of clay, and by the knowledge of that lump of clay, Sarvam Mrinmayam Vijñatam Syat. All that is clay is known. Because if you see one lump of clay, you know the property or the nature of all lumps of clay. Similarly, Vacharambanam Vikaro Namadeo. And all that Namadeyam, they are just different names given by language. Vacharambanam, language. Vikaraha Namadeyam. The different modifications are all given, all type of names and forms, all that are different modifications which are expressed by language. But actually what is true there? Mrittika ityeva satyam. There only reality is clay. So you change the form, you make pot, you make some other vessel, you make a ladle, means a spoon, you make all that thing, but picture, whatever you make of clay, or you make a doll, you make a small cart to play, whatever you make of clay, in essence it is only clay. All others are only names and forms using different languages. So here, this is pratigyatam. Already it has been told, declared, that if you know the cause, you can know everything. Now that cannot be denied. Evam somya sa adesho bhavati. This is how that instruction is given. What is the instruction? That how do you know something which cannot be known? That kind of instruction is given. Iti vakya upakrame shravanat. Like that, in the beginning, we have already seen this. In the beginning, we have already upakrama shravanat. Upakrame shravanat. So in the beginning, that is told. In the beginning, that is told. That is the context, which is the pratigya, which is the declaration. So this cannot be now denied. Nacha sakshabda vachye pradhane bhogya varga karane heyatvena aheyatvanava vijñate bhoktru vargo vijñato bhavati. So here there is a very peculiar situation. Nacha also Sat Shabda Vachye Pradhane. If Pradhana, were to be taken to be the meaning of the word Sat, then it will become the cause of Bhogya Varga. All the things which can be experienced. All the things which can be experienced. So according to Sankhya philosophy, Pradhana is the cause of this universe. Pradhana is also the cause of all that can be experienced. Okay. So if the word Sat were to mean Pradhana, which actually we know by Sankhya philosophy itself, that it is the cause, Karana, of Bhogya Varga, of the class of things which can be experienced. Then Heyatvena, Aheyatvena va. Even if you were to reject it, that means if you were to consider it as prohibition, or if you were to accept it, Aheya means you are actually accepting, Upadeya. You accept it, either way, Vijnate, you know that it has to be prohibited or it has to be accepted. Either way you know it. Bhoktru Varga Vijnatah na bhavati. By doing that, one cannot know the Varga or the class of the experiencer. Pradhana is the cause of all that is experienced. So if you know Pradhana, you can know all that which is experienced. Whether you are going to prohibit that or whether you are going to reject it or accept it, even then, either way, by knowing all that is experienced, you cannot know that which is experiencing, that is the experiencer, because apradhana vikaratvat bhoktru vargasya. Because in the case of clay, clay's vikara, modification of clay, is pot, pitcher, toy, etc. But in the case of experiencer, apradhana vikara tvat bhoktru vargasya, bhoktru varga, the class of experiencer, the category of varga, category or class of bhoktru, bhoktru means experiencer, is not a modification of pradhana. Modification of pradhana is that which is experienced, but it is not the cause of that which is experiencing. That means the experiencer. Tasmat, therefore, na pradhanam sat shabda vachyam. Pradhana is not the meaning of the word sat. So then what happens? Now you think that it has been concluded beyond doubt that pradhana is not the meaning of the word sat? No. Again the question comes, kutaschana pradhanam sat shabda vachyam. Why is pradhana not the meaning of the word sat? So that we will see day after tomorrow. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.